All right, good morning. Let's get started. Here we are, once again at the Moot House, day before Thanksgiving. I would have to say, hands down, this is my favorite holiday. What about you guys? It really is. It's a good. The whole week has been good in the sense of, thinking of people that have had influence in your life, and I've made a few phone calls this week and thanking people for the year we've had and our relationship, primarily in the business realm, and it's a good thing to do. And I don't know, maybe some of you have done that as well. But Thanksgiving, just to be grateful, is a very important thing. Well, we're looking at continuing our look at Jacob, and yes, Jack, we're moving through. We're going to move it to stage 5 today. Keeping track. Yeah, already, yes. We've been looking at this model. We've been looking at the first 3 stages of that model, and how stages 1, 2, 3 is all about me. We're looking at Jacob and how he is representing. I've kind of plugged examples of his life into these 7 stages of growth that I've derived. It's not original with me, but I've kind of massaged it in how I perceive it. But we're now at stage 4, and we're going to move into stage 5. We looked at stage 4 last week. Stage 4 is a very important transitional stage, and we could talk about that in the language in our culture. We call it the midlife crisis, because that is a really good example of what stage 4 looks like, and where up until that point, life has been pretty much centered, around the development of one's being, and it's not wrong. It is certainly egocentric, but an identity has to be built. But as the gospel is very clear, as Jesus' words is very clear, and his example, that there has got to be, there's an opportunity to move beyond that to something else. Thus, his example of the grain of wheat falling into the ground and dying. There's got to be a major death that occurs. And stage 4 is where that starts to happen in a person's life, where for the first time that person is able to embrace what I'm calling the negative. And we talked about that last week. So that's what that slide is all about, is just in review. Here's another review. Stages 1, 2, 3 is pretty center focused on either my own security, the love and acceptance through relationships, which is very important. All of these are important, and the building of an identity, stage 3. But notice the idea of God is in our lives. We're aware of God, but the need to build the identity overtakes that at these stages of life. Stage 4, though, something happens, and that something happens is, geez, the life that I have built is just not working. There's an unknowing uneasiness, a troublesome inside. You guys at our age, we understand that. We know there's we can't give words to it, but there is a dissatisfaction within us. And that, in my opinion, is the work of God pulling us to something bigger. So now the way I've got this illustrated is that this greater pull to something else has become much more powerful in our lives. We don't know what it is. It's, as John of the Cross talked about, the dark night of the soul. These are things we're talking about. These times of darkness, and it's in the words of Jesus, John 15, the pruning, and these things are happening, and we most likely can't give language to it. So that's stages 4 and 5. Notice I've got 5 in there. 5 is we're gonna move to 5 now, and compare it to stage 4. So anyway, here's stage 5, and the text that I've chosen is Genesis 32, 24 through 32. We'll look at that up on the screen here in just a little bit. But the action is Jacob wrestling with God, and you're aware of that. We looked at that in great detail several weeks ago of the actual text itself. But I think stage 5 culminates right here with this wrestling that happens, and the culmination of the wrestling is what we call the sacred wounding, is where this is a severe time in a person's life. And the example of Jacob is so graphic in what it looks like, is where there is a wrestling with God. You know, in the early stages of growth and development, we talk about fighting the devil, and evil and so forth. Well, I would venture to say that later on in life, it's more of a wrestling with God and facing these realities of the me and that picture of an actual wrestling match and the wounding. And after the wounding, Jacob's words are, "Don't let me go." You know, after we experience something like that, and I think you guys know that example is how we feel at this stage in life. You know, we know our limitations, we know our vulnerabilities, we know our weaknesses at this stage, and without God, we're sunk. And so there is where stage 5, sacred wounding, resulting in the discovery of a unified center, and that's the key. No, I'm going to have to get some language to that, but that's where this idea of unified center is stage 5, and that's what we want to talk about. So here's a little more detail on that idea. Here's stage 3, and we talked about at late stage 3 these longings begin to occur in our being, and that gives way to stage 4 when we are able to embrace the negative. That is a huge step in anyone's life, is when they can embrace the negative. And I quoted Helen Keller's quote on how she thanks God for her disabilities. She thanks God for her disabilities because through those she found herself, she found her work, and she found God through her disabilities. So counterintuitive than how we think. We think it's strength and overpowering and conquering, but it's surrender, and it's the message of the gospel, embracing the negative. And in Jacob's life, we saw him demonstrating embracing the negative when he was overtaken by Laban, and Laban says, "Why did you do this?" My words, bonehead thing, leaving without saying goodbye. And he goes, "Because I was afraid." Honest self-assessment, and that's demonstrated. He's embracing that about him, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that's stage 4. And then what stage 4 gives us permission to do is to really face the me. And that's what stage 5 is stage 4 is the doorway of the idea of embracing the negative and integrating negative into our lives. But stage 5 is where that then is turned inward, and through that there is a huge amount of work, and it's ugly, that happens inside. We face the me inside, the me that has been shellacked over years and years with the seed coating, and we finally start turning inward, and out of it comes a beautiful thing, which for the first time in life we're really able to operate from a unified central being. It's the idea of really starting for the first time in life understanding how God has made me. And that is what stage 5 is all about. A little more detail yet, comparison. This is what stage 5 looks like. Remember, I've been doing this contrast of when one is acting out of a trust in God, transformation is taking place. This is true. And when one is working out of human resources, through the seed coat that we tend to cover over our true being, the way God has made us, that's what it looks like. So how do those two look at stage 5? Well, over here, the authentic indicators, what I've got here is for the... Can you guys actually read that?
Is this an eye test, Mike?
What's that?
Yeah. Is this an eye test?
Yeah, but can you read it or no?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. Because I can. Here, let me try this, guys.
Oh yeah. Oh, there you go.
Okay, for the first time, joy and sorrow can coexist. This is stage 5. This is huge. Because for the bulk of our lives, we fight the negative. We fight sorrow. We do not invite grief and sorrow into our lives. Like what is happening in our friends' lives here, what we've heard this morning. But sorrow tends to devastate us. So it doesn't take us out, paralyzes us. We want to get through it as fast as we can so we can get back to the joy. That is what life, that is what our culture reflects. But what stage 5 is about is we become comfortable with sorrow and joy coexisting together, and we realize that that is truly what life is and what life is meant to be. Jesus called himself man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was able to embrace those. I mean, his whole message through his life is about embracing the joy and the sorrow in one being. That's the incarnation. So joy and sorrow can coexist. The conflict within, because of this, the conflict within subsides. The war within starts to subside, and giving way to a cohesive desire for authenticity, the real. We catch ourselves, oh, come on. Quit posing. Get real. We catch ourselves. We want authenticity. We want what's real. With little regard, this is cool, with little regard to what that may look like at any given time. We don't really care. Now we care. We don't throw out cultural niceties out, manners and things. No. The heck with you. No, that's not it at all. But we're not so guarded anymore. Like we have to, what's the right thing to say and what's the wrong thing to say, and we're able to flow, as Jesus talks about, the living waters can start to come out, and it's more natural, cast in our personality of who God has already made us to be. It's the real me finally coming out at this time. This is new. This newfound freedom releases me to face the me. Okay, that's what we've been talking about. To face the me. It's not so fearful anymore, because I don't have to guard myself, protect myself, which I've worked so hard and so long to create. This me that I have created, I can finally face that. This is never pretty. Fear, anger, shame will be present, but their grip does not seem as paralyzing because I am now residing and operating from a place much more secure. The place that God, it's a discovery time of realizing God has made me and God has made you unique. And what's been there for years and years and years is now starting to be able to come out. And so here's on the adaptive side. Notice how the way I've got this drawn. I've got this drawn that. Notice the seed coat. You can barely see it. Well, I've got that illustrating something that the seed coat has now cracked open. Picture that. The seed, like a bean or any kind of natural seed. The seed is in the soil, and there's moisture in the soil, and now the workings of that environment for life has softened the seed coat, and the seed coat is broken open, and now you can see right from the middle of the seed a little stem. Anybody raised beans as kids, like for science project? Can't you just picture that in your head? That bean splitting open, and that new fresh green shaft coming out. Stage 5. There's something living in there that has been lying dormant for years and years. That's the idea of the seed coat. And now it's cracked open, allowing the life which has been hidden to spring forth. I may choose to retreat. I can still do that, and I will do that, in fear, shame, or guilt, but I am not held captive by my self-imposed constructs. We're not held captive because we've experienced something bigger. And here it is. I have come to know experientially. And that's really what we're talking about here is our Christian experience here. What it means to fall upon the stone, allowing that which I've created to be broken. I've been meditating on this passage in Matthew. That is a really enigmatic. You know what the passage I'm talking about? He who falls upon the stone shall be broken into pieces, but whoever what's that?
The stone falls on top of it.
Yeah, what the heck is he talking about? Well, I mean, it's open for interpretation, but it's in the context of the Pharisees. And they said, well, they got that, hey, we think he's talking about us. Well, they're not the bad guys. We are the Pharisees. It's not them. They're not the guys with the black hats. But I think we can, take a stab at it and look at it experientially, is that if we willingly fall upon the stone and we see what we have created broken to pieces, and I think the implication there is life. Now that's take it for what it is. I was looking at that text though in this light. You got to admit though, there's room for interpretation, right? Okay, so there's that. Now let's see if we can shrink that down. Yep. And then here's a quote, and I chose this quote from Henry Nouwen because it's an example of this operating stage 5 in the context of gratitude. This week is a week of gratitude, which every week should be, but I chose this specifically to show how it works. Gratitude involves a conscious choice. And then he goes on to say, I can choose to be grateful even when my emotions and feelings are still steeped in hurt and resentment. Do you guys know that one? You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. We can choose. We are now at a point in life where we can choose.
Is this what the Bible calls a sacrifice of thanksgiving?
There you go.
And God says, he who offers me a sacrifice of thanksgiving honors me. So we're called to come to this.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. That's sacrifice, because something's got to be given up. My will, my ego, my hurt, my pain, I give those up. And it's a sacrifice of thanksgiving. That's really good. Thank you, Everett. I can choose to be grateful when I am criticized, even when my heart still responds in bitterness. That's even a little heavier. I think, Dave, do you have something?
Yeah, the first half of that really speaks to the believer or the Christian who finds himself, as several of our brothers do this morning, in the midst of grief. Because of where we are in this process, because we know who our Father is, we know that we are His children, we know what His promises are, we can choose to be grateful even in the midst of our emotions and feelings that make us very, very sad, and even a natural part of human grief is resentment and anger, sometimes even at God, why did you take this person? But at the nub of that is I know I can be grateful because I know that I know that I know where my loved one is.
And we see this. I have not lost I've lost loved ones, but not a tragedy like what like what Ellen is going through right now. But David, you're so, and you have seen it in your line of work and experience. You've seen probably both. You've seen outbursts of anger and grief, and then you've seen, but then a swing to, but I'm so grateful. And that's the paradox of life. Yes.
I'm struggling with this because the platitudes, and they're good platitudes, they're truths, they're scriptural truths, but they come your way when you're going through something like this. I mean, aren't you glad that God's Spirit's with you and the peace of Christ and all these things? For me, I know the real, but the cerebral. To experience that, I got to get alone, get quiet, open my scripture, and ponder that, because most of the time, life's coming at me, especially when I'm going through grief and stuff, too fast and furious for me to sit there, I really feel the spiritual presence today. I don't. And that's why I think people are coming back to this idea of get in a community, because unless you can incarnate those promises in people's hands and presence and help and sharing grief with you, and sharing grief, unless it can be people around you to do it, that is what drags you out of the hole. You can't go on a quiet spiritual retreat and recover from that. Maybe you can. I don't know.
I don't know.
You got to have people around you who put these promises wrapped in flesh and come to you in your support. And without a community, that the individual, the lone-age Christian, is really all they're going to do is have to sit down and go through this mental gyrations of, okay, now if I ponder this long, if I got it, I know God is by you. God's Spirit is in you. Unless I can grab hold of that, I'm beat up. I need somebody.
Well, Dave Brown, what degree of importance would you put on a community of people going through, as one goes through a grieving process?
Very, very important, extremely important. A pastor that I know years ago phrased what he was saying in the context of sometimes people just need God with skin on them. And that's true, because those are the ones that nourish us and strengthen us. But there comes a point where it has to get beyond our individual mental capacities into a spiritual understanding and presence. And until we get to that point spiritually, the peace that is offered to us will not descend on us. So it ultimately has to be out of the brain and into the spiritual realm for true peace to be.
And how do you have some input on how you think that happens?
Oh, it's so different for everyone. But a lot of it is resignation.
Okay.
Like laying down myself, barriers, the rationalizations, the reasons, and all the rest of this, and
letting go.
To use another one of the platitudes, you cannot be closer to God than lying at the foot of His cross. And by lying there, you're submitting yourself, you're giving yourself up.
Yeah.
But it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
But having people in your midst is extremely important,
Yeah.
extremely important. And that is a criticism, and Bob can attest to this as well with his work. And you touched on it earlier. It is an ill in our society today that in the midst of grief and losing loved ones and everything, so many of us are so busy with whatever it is that we're busy with,
Yeah.
that we shove this aside and we end up scarred, deeply scarred. And it makes the healing that needs to happen all the more difficult
Yeah.
and lengthy
Yeah.
because we don't take time to grieve. I shared with you on the phone the other day about, you all remember the quote from Charlie Brown in his comic strip. His quote very frequently when something happened was, "Oh, good grief." There is good grief, and there is bad grief. And our society's in too much of a hurry to experience good grief. And it's very, very sad.
And for example, just the way we think, Alan lost his son, so the services will be. Typically in our heads we go, well, gee, did we do this assessment? Do I even go to the service? I mean, this is what's in our heads, in our culture. Did I know him well enough to go to this service? Versus, how can I enter into grief? How can I engage it? I can't fix it, but how can I engage into grief, with this family? Morning.
Morning, how are you?
Good. What's up?
We got the cooler pretty full back there from the produce guy, so I just leave the other stuff out.
I guess you'll have to make that assessment, because I wouldn't know
Alright, thanks.
already.
Can I have a couple minutes?
Yes, of course.
My wife Ellen's from Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is Reformed Christian Central. It's Salt Lake City to the Reformed churches, Utah's to the Mormons. And she has 3 brothers. She's the oldest, but her older brother had 1 child, and after about a year of life, the child got meningitis, and when the smoke cleared, he was radically brain damaged. And so, for the rest of their lives, 24/7, they raised this child as he grew up in a state of being maybe a one, I don't know how you test, but a year-old kid. I mean, couldn't even really swallow the liquids, but you could get the liquids by feeding him yogurt and stuff, and cleaning, changing his diapers all through life, until he was about 22, and they found a home, because now he's a 160-pound man, and it was getting hard, so they found a home, and then they would go to that home every day to see him. When most of the 3 or 4 kids in this home nobody would see him. These are kids who once they got rid of, they were left there. That was a long, tragic thing. And Joey died about a year ago, a little over a month or so a year ago, and then followed by her mom's death in May. So he lived with this kind of grieving process that was ongoing for 20. Every time we looked at his son, could have been, yet they loved him dearly, all those complexities.
Yeah.
But they didn't get a lot of support from the church, at least that's his story. And so he kind of gave up on the church. And he would find individual people who would come out who just felt called to help him, give him a week, take his son for a week so they could get away.
Like a respite.
A respite kind of thing. And when Joey died, they didn't have a funeral, but they had a reception at this place. And Paul was telling me about this. Reverend Ansel, this guy worked at the one home with Joey, knew him, and I got to meet Reverend Ansel. Reverend Ansel was a black pastor, about my age. He looked a lot older, he was smaller, he was skinny, and just bouncing with energy. And his wife was there, and he had some janitorial job, but he was associate pastor in an AME church in there, which is a rarity in that area. And his wife had a little higher level job this thing. She was going to retire in 2 or 3 years, and she kind of, you can see her money kind of kept the family afloat. When she retired with her pension, they were going to go, and he was going to take a head pastorship job at an AME church in Flint, Michigan. And you talk about going into let's take on a challenge here. But the thing is Paul absolutely loved the man and trusted him. He was the only guy he would let speak into those things. Paul kind of carried the same. he wouldn't say it this way, but you're not worthy to speak to me about these things, platitudes, until you've suffered a lot, because this is tough.
Yeah.
Well, you can guarantee you a black pastor in an AME church had some suffering in his history.
Yeah.
It was interesting. That was the man who he got closest to. Trust him. I thought that was really interesting.
And I think it bears witness.
Amen.
It bears witness. That's exactly right. Well, I think we're at 7:30, so let me just summarize. Stage 4 is the idea where we can open the door enough to trust, to embrace the negative, the realities of the negative into our lives. That is huge. That is a huge step. Stage 5 is a natural outcome of stage 4, where I turn that inward to face. I give myself permission to face the me, and me is not bad, but it's what I've created, and it's what you've created. But it's a scary thing to face that. And the end game of stage 5 is that we begin for the first time in our life, to be able to operate out of a unified center. And this just isn't something we get when we graduate from high school. This is something that takes years and years in all of us. But out of it comes something wonderful. I would call it a resurrection. And that's where we're going to go.
The world needs broken people.
Yes.
Agreed. Okay, well, we want to be in prayer for the Joneses and the Keiths. And next week, I guess we'll meet here next week. Maybe we'll see some of us at the service on Tuesday. So, all right, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah.
Wow. And we'll see you next week.
See you.